do it live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are reviewing the week's progress of Leadwerks 5. It's currently in early access. We're approaching full release pretty soon. I'm not exactly sure, but I'd say within like 6 to 8 weeks probably. Um, and this is a very, very cool week. This was our first week after having the downloads manager um, added and working, and suddenly we just had this explosion of people posting screenshots. Funny how that works. So last week, 14 bugs were solved. Just something I added yesterday was the directional light will allow you to define each shadow stage individually. So you don't have to rely on my equation, which takes the first distance and then doubles it each time. You can tweak that to your heart's content. That'll go up in an update right after this meeting. I'm actually have the compiler. I set the compiler up to run to do a full rebuild of everything right before I started this, which is why I was a few minutes late. So that's running right now to compile that. 50 HDR skyboxes were released from Ambient CG. Those are all available right in the editor in the downloads in the integrated downloads manager. This rock formations pack I found. This is released with the Creative Commons attribution license, CC BY. So that's available right now. It's got colliders and LODs included, and you can grab it right in the editor. Just go to the little downloads icon, and this is the first thing that will pop up, or the third thing, and then just click install, and it'll download it and install it right into your project. And Metal OS, thank you, Metal OS. He's been releasing trees, very cool trees. Um,
Ah,
really appreciate it, and yeah, it's really cool to have like this is kind of equivalent to like having the code samples in the documentation because it's something that everybody can grab and everybody can access it very easily, and these kind of actually function as like a unit test almost. It's like a unit test for art. um, and um, as soon as I had this system in place, then it made me want to upload models. So the results are very cool. So now, let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So first of all, these rock formations, fab.com actually they've added a license you can filter by the. They have some content that is released under the Creative Commons attribution license, and you can filter for it. And there's some things in there that almost seem like they're too good to be Creative Commons licensed, and this is one of those things. And but I think some artists, I think what they do is they'll release like one free item just to try to increase their popularity in the store. But the pickings are kind of slim, but there are a few things in there that are pretty good, and I have a
like
pretty good
too good
understanding
to
of
be true.
what people want. First of all, like the most common kind of stuff people want is outdoors scenery, so like rocks and plants and trees. That's always the number one. Like for DLCs on Steam, like that's always like the number one selling item. And then I'd say the number two most common thing that people are looking for is anything medieval. Anything medieval tends to be pretty popular because a lot of people like RPGs and want to make an RPG. Um, I plan to just release like packs of models every week for you, just so you have something to play with. Um, just as free downloads, and it doesn't all have to be the absolute best stuff, but it's really good just to have like something that we can all look at for reference or use even if it's only used as a placeholder. This is very, very useful. And so another thing that's I was playing around with was Polyhaven's their latest set that they've made. It's called Namakwa Land, which is kind of a cool name. Apparently, it's like this desert. region somewhere in South Africa where they're from. But I imported a couple of models, and what's special about this pack is this is the first time that they've done LODs. Typically, all their stuff is for like, I think it's all designed for like film and CG and stuff. Um, this is the first thing that they've released that's actually usable for games. Some, except for like some of the medium-sized bushes, like their low poly version is like 90,000 polys for a plant. Um, but other than that, everything there is pretty good. A little bit on the high poly side, perhaps, but it's good quality stuff. So I started importing these models, and one of Metal OS's trees is Acacia tree. I downloaded it and I just applied a bark material to it from, I think this came from Ambient CG probably. This was from within our download system and it looked very cool. Okay, so um, if you have bad artwork, it's impossible to tell if your rendering is correct or not because it just looks bad no matter what. Um, but if you have good artwork and it doesn't look right, then it becomes a lot easier to identify any problems that you have in your rendering. And so one thing I found with this this all came about because of the ambient CG skyboxes. I wouldn't have figured this out otherwise. Some of the skyboxes that ambient CG has are really really bright because they're HDR images, they're photo based. Um, and then we've also seen that the IBL setting, like the PBR image based lighting reflections for outdoors scenery, it tends to be really like overly bright, like to where it gets where it like washes out the shadows, and that always bugged me, but I didn't quite understand the reason for that. And I actually found I started messing around with it because I was actually just taking the HDR images and I was trying to make the JPEG image previews um, for the just to add to the just to add to the as the image preview for the item in the download system. And I was having trouble even getting the JPEGs to look right. Like they were too bright or too washed out. Something wasn't right. And I started looking more closely at the tone mapping equation, and I realized, oh crap, like that's supposed to be done in. Okay, so I was doing uh, the color calculations in linear color space, and then converting to sRGB, and then adding tone mapping afterwards. And actually, I think you're supposed to do the tone mapping in linear color space and then convert to sRGB. And I'll show you the difference. Um, this is what tone mapping looks like when it's applied in sRGB. And I actually thought I thought this was just what it was supposed to look like. It's kind of this is the ACE's filmic tone mapping. And I thought it was just supposed to be kind of washed out like that. This is what it looks like if it's after sRGB. But if you do it before sRGB, then it looks more like that. Um,
I
so let me
prefer
show.
the after.
So let me show you. If you just take some of those ambient CG skyboxes, if you just take it and plop it in a scene with with the IBL reflection set to 100%, you'll get this.
Mm,
Now, this is the sky is very very bright, and this one in particular, I think the kind of weather it is, it's like a layer of low fog is covering the sky in every direction, and then but it's like a thin layer of fog, so the sun is shining through it and it just illuminates everywhere. We have a lot of days like this in Southern California, um, like where it's just like it's cloudy out. You know when it's cloudy outside, but it's like so super bright that you need sunglasses, and it's actually like almost like brighter than a sunny day because it's coming from every direction.
like
So
a mirror extension.
yeah, so this is actually, I mean, this is correct. This is what the light will look like if you just took like a non-correct a photo that was not corrected. This is what the actual light levels look like. Okay, well, how can we improve this? Well, the auto exposure will fix that because it'll detect that it's so bright and it'll darken it, right? That's what happens when you add auto exposure. It's a lot better, but the sky still looks overexposed. Okay, now let's take the tone map and let's apply tone mapping in linear space before it's in linear color space before we convert it back to sRGB. Oh,
That's beautiful.
Ah,
this is actually like from a technical standpoint, this is one of the best screenshots I've ever made.
yeah. I would add that to the Steam page as one of the advertisement photos, just to provide game engine interface and UI implementations.
Yeah, the lighting in this is really good, and it's a hard image because the colors are all just like on a knife's edge. But this is the
Ah,
default settings. I mean with the auto exposure filter. So what you want to do is you want to have for any outdoor scenery, you probably really need this. Unless you could get away with it if it's like a dark, cloudy skybox. You could get away without it, but for anything bright, you need this. You need to have auto exposure first. That needs to be your first post processing effect, and then your last post processing effect should always be tone mapping. So yeah, then that's once I did that, I started getting images like this. And let's see. So here are some trees that Metal OS um, uploaded in the system, and they're good trees, but they don't look right. And here's that problem I was talking about, where like by default the IBL the reflection of the IBL intensity looks way too bright, um, to where it's washing out all the light. And this when you apply the auto exposure and tone mapping to that, it just automatically fixes it. This is probably using 100% IBL. This IBL reflection setting here is probably 100%, just like it is here. But the when you apply the auto exposure and the tone mapping, it kind of fixes all the colors, and it's really interesting to see the the shader equations are behaving a lot like real photography and the way that light actually behaves. Is one I guess from what I gather, like one of the major challenges in photography is you have a very limited range of brightness, and so you have to take you have this huge range of brightness of real colors, and you have to compress it down into a visible range that either your computer monitor can display or the photograph itself can display. And so that's what that does. So it's really interesting to see the shader code acting very similarly to how photography and how your actual eye works. That tells me that it's on the right track. So that was a big this is a big jump in quality, and it all came about because of I was using good artwork. And it's not any special effect. It's not some post processing shader, really. It's not some special flashy effect. It's just really good color balance. So that if you use auto exposure first and then tone mapping last, you'll get really good color balance in any outdoors, well, any scene at all, but outdoor scenes in particular will look really good. Yeah, the colors are like so well balanced and so rich. And that was like, yeah, the whole thing. I was just like looking at it, and I was like, that doesn't look right. What do I need to do to make this look really good? So this is a big jump in quality. I also revisited the screen space ambient occlusion shader, and I'm very happy with the results I got with this. I rendered the same effect to a half resolution texture buffer to increase the performance, and then I didn't actually need that many. I think I just use 8 samples per pixel, and I just tweaked the settings until I got the look that I wanted, which was I wanted it to not be so much of an outline. I wanted it to have more of a ray traced look to it. And I also wanted another important thing is I wanted it to appear more strongly in dark areas and to appear to be not very visible in light areas. That's really important because otherwise you can't really see the effect, or else it's like overpowering. So this, I'm very happy with this. And then in a second pass, I ran it through the denoise filter. So those results are really good. Okay. Now I have an area. I have 2 areas of secret research I performed last week. Well, one's not so secret, but I'll talk about it first, and the other one is totally secret.
That out.
So one thing I wanted to try out was this technique from Star Wars Battlefront. This is terrain mesh blending, and what you do is you just the meshes just detect where they are on the terrain, and just copy the terrain's texture over to them, sort of. Yeah, you can see it here. And it makes the meshes blend into the terrain a lot better. These are already pretty. These textures go together pretty well already, so it's not. I mean, it wasn't a huge problem on these, but I think if you have something like a rock on grass, I think it'll make a big difference because it'll prevent that. It will prevent you from seeing like a really obvious line where the rock ends and the ground begins. So that's one area of, I did enough that I could see that, okay, this will work. And I think it's a good technique. You also have to blend the normals because otherwise you'll get like a really obvious edge. It's not implemented yet. It's not a finished technique because there's a lot of other settings and stuff that needs to be added to make it really usable. Like, for example, if you have like really small plants, you need to be able to disable it and adjust the blend distance on a per object basis. Because if you have like really small rocks or plants, if they're getting blended and they're very small, they'll just be completely invisible. So, sometimes I like to just jump ahead a little bit, like peek ahead and test something out and just see if it works. And then I'm like, okay, cool. That's something that I'm going to do when I have time. And then I go back and then, at some point in the future, I go back and I finish it and turn it into a finished, available feature. But this was a cool thing to prototype and just see, okay, this actually works really well, especially with our renderer. This is all being done in a single pass. So that's something we can expect to see in the future. The other area of research, I just messed around with it. I just started like yesterday afternoon, and I had it working within a couple of hours. Something very cool called Intel Embree. Does anybody know what this is? Without looking.
That's completely new for me, and I've been using Intel for the last God knows how many years, so impress me.
Okay, so Embree is a library used in computer graphics for the purpose of ray tracing. It's a raycasting library. It's not graphics itself, really. It's just pure ray tracing. And by that, I mean it calculates the intersections of a line and mesh. So it's not, I'm not saying that I have ray tracing implemented. I'm saying that
it's a possibility that it will be implemented.
Well, let's start with what this does and then talk about like how it could be used. Um, so I was able to. This is running on the CPU. I guess it can also run on ARC cards, but I don't care about that. I did a test. This is a hidden thread, but I'll unhide it as soon as the update goes up. I did a test on a 16,000 polygon sphere. I did 100,000 raycasts with half of them hitting and half of them missing, just kind of randomly oriented around the sphere. And it was able to do 100,000 raycasts in 7 milliseconds. Hmm. That means you could do 200,000 raycasts in 16 milliseconds. Less than 16 milliseconds. Okay, so that's our budget. Is two. Let's say about 200,000 raycasts per frame. Is that enough to do? Is that enough for real-time ray tracing? No. But if you were using accumulation, which every real-time ray tracing implementation does, could that be fast enough to calculate real-time global illumination? It's in the range of that's in the range of possibility. Yeah. If it works, it would run well on all hardware with no performance cost on the GPU.
Even on AMD sockets?
Yeah, this runs fine on AMD. It uses there's some CPU optimized code is like magic. So if you open a 1024 by 1024 ping file in Visual Studio and you save it and then look at press F4 to open up the properties, and then change the pixel format to BC7 and then press save, it'll take your computer about 5 minutes to compress that ping file into a BC7 DDS file. It'll take about 5 minutes. I use a library from Intel that's like super crazy optimized code that performs that BC7 compression in a few seconds. So that's like, that's like a 500 increase, that's like a 500 increase in performance. That's at least like 300 times faster, at least.
Yeah, anything that's like not 4K goes pretty fast.
Yeah, try doing if you do a 4K in Visual Studio, it'll seriously take like 30 minutes.
Right.
So I have seen that some CPU code is almost like magic. It's like when it's done right. This uses the SIMD instruction set, which I guess that's SSE. It's some weird like hyper optimized math code that CPUs support. I've never used it directly myself, but it's a you can get. I don't know what the SIMD version versus the non-SIMD version is, what that performance is like, and I also don't know how this performs compared to Newton raycasting. Of course, if you're doing just a world pick command, there's a lot of overhead to that. But if I just took the pure Newton raycasting code and performed 100,000 raycasts, I don't know what with everything set up so that there was no overhead in those calls, I don't know what the results would be. Maybe it would be this fast. I'm not sure, but this 100,000 raycasts per frame. That is in the range of where CPU ray tracing becomes plausible. At least not for for a per pixel reflection, but for global illumination. Yeah, definitely for like soft global illumination, including like some soft reflections, not just diffuse, but some soft reflections. Yeah, 100,000 raycasts per frame, and then you can accumulate those. If you can accumulate those results, that means you can do about 6 million raycasts per second. Well, here's why CPU ray tracing might, for global illumination, for dynamic global illumination, might actually make a lot of sense. So what we've seen is people have a pretty high tolerance for accumulated GI. Every single real-time ray tracing routine out there, including NVIDIA's own stuff with like Portal and Quake, uses accumulation. So what that means is when you spin around and look at something, the picture gets better and better the more you look at it. You'll notice like when something comes into view, it's in NVIDIA's own stuff too. It won't look as good the first frame, and then it'll combine the results from the previous frames to improve the quality of the image. And we also use some like reprojection techniques that do this as well, like Klepto's SSAO shader. His version is a little bit different from mine, but you should just try both and see what you like better. But I think he's using reprojection and accumulation, so where the image gets better over time. And we're talking like very, very short periods of time, like 10 iterations of the renderer within 1/6 of a second. So because it's 60 frames per second, something like that. So here's why CPU ray tracing might make sense. If we approach everything from the standpoint that, okay, there's going to be accumulation used. Well, it turns out GPUs are really bad at background tasks. GPUs can't do background tasks. They do things in sequence. And if you look at the Vulkan specification, they have something called a queue priority. And when I was experimenting with voxel-based global illumination, this is something that I went to a lot of trouble to implement this. But it turns out the queue priority, it doesn't do anything. And you can even look in the Vulkan specification itself. It says, like the last line of the page that deals with this, it says like the behavior of the queue priority is unspecified and may vary from vendor to vendor. In other words, it doesn't do anything. Maybe it will in the future. But GPUs are just not, they don't really have a concept of background tasks. They do one thing and finish it, and then they do the next thing. They do it really well in parallel, but they don't do background tasks. CPUs are great at background tasks. And that work could be spread across many frames. When you do this, this is sort of equivalent to getting like a 100% increase in processing power, because if you turn around and it takes 1.5 seconds for the image for the global illumination to be completely finished, that's equivalent to like a 100 times increase in processing power. And as long as it's smooth, as long as it just sort of gradually fades in, then people seem to not mind that. And so it seems to be an okay approach. And I mean, it's a totally necessary approach with today's hardware too. This would have no impact on the rendering speed because it would just be done on a bunch of threads on your CPU. And most of the time, unless you're doing really heavy physics or animation or something, probably 60% of your CPU power is unused while the game is running. So we do have that underutilized power that might make sense to use it for this. And then finally, like if you do need more power, you can get CPU power for a lot cheaper than you can get GPU power. A 16 core, I found a 16 core CPU for it was a first generation Threadripper with 16 cores for like $270 versus I think a GeForce 5080 is like $2,000. So you can quadruple your ray tracing power for $270. That sounds like a pretty good deal. That also sounds like a good segue to our sponsor. When I need quality computer parts at reasonable prices, I go to newegg.com. Enter promo code Leadwerks to receive 95% off of everything that you buy for the rest of your life. Newegg. Once you know, you Newegg.
And be honest with you, I haven't used Newegg in like years.
I don't know why anybody orders things from Amazon. Like I always order from Newegg, and I always make sure I'm buying from them and not some third party.
Amazon can't be accessed in Cambodia, otherwise it's like $120 import and delivery cost. So yeah.
In Cambodia? Well, you guys
Well,
you guys
especially
have the
where I am.
Chinese version of that. What is it?
It's we use Alibaba
Yeah, that's the one.
and what's the other one that's mainly used?
Wish.
Not no, that's not
EU.
known. No, it's not really known. That's more EU. It's Lamanda or something like that. But
Well,
it's Alibaba is our main one.
yeah. That's yeah, okay. Cool. So, yeah. That was quite a lot. Quite very interesting week. Any questions about any of that?
So the global illumination, would that replace the probes, or would that be used in conjunction with the current probe system?
I don't know.
Good answer.
I'll have to try it first. But yeah, I mean that's like, yeah, this could be
Because
doable.
placing probes is like really, really annoying.
Well, it's nice that you are able to. I mean, it's nice that you. What's really nice about
Fine
those
tune.
is you can have a. You can combine indoor and outdoor lighting. You can have a house that's very dark in the inside and with 3-inch thick walls, and then the outside can be like super super bright. Um,
Right. And then
that's
we can use this technology when a wall breaks and the light pours in.
well. Let's see how it works out. But
Uh,
this does look
the,
pretty
the,
good.
the bad part on the rope system is that you need to do the size for your own.
Yeah, it's an art. Video games are art.
Well, it gives you precise control.
But how about this? If you put in the probe into the scene, and then you have a button you can click, and this button sends out 8 raycasts, or eight.
Oh, and
I
just
think
auto
8
size it.
raycasts,
Yeah,
and
that's a
auto-size it.
good idea.
I think this is a pretty easy solution,
That
and
would
at
be
least
very handy.
something.
Yeah, I think I can probably do that.
We were also mentioning about integrating LLM services with the IDE.
Yeah,
I would,
yeah. Do you guys
yeah.
want to talk about
So
that?
like, I would.
Okay,
So
was this an idea that you just had, or was it because of something that I
no,
said
this is
last
what
week?
Drake Black said about like the secret feature, and he brought it up, and he said, "Oh no, that's a great idea," but with your AI plugging thing, you only made it like compatible with OpenAI servers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking you this time, since getting large language models installed on personal computers has been getting easier and easier over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I would love if you were to just allow the user to use their own Olama server or or linkage to handle their coding for
Okay,
them.
so I don't know if he saw what I said, so I'm not sure if it was his idea first or my idea first. But last week, it was you, the guy. His name is YUE. He had like
Yeah.
a minor coding problem in the programming forum, And I think the problem was just he was looping through an array, and arrays in Lua start with 1. Like that's the first value, index value is 1 and not 0, like C++. So and the error he had was he was saying he was starting with 0. And I saw the problem and I told him what it was, but then I looked at that and I was like, huh. I took his code and I went to you.com, which is basically it's ChatGPT without any sign in. And I typed in, I said something like, if find the bug in this Lua code and make your corrections, add an explanation in the comments for any corrections that you make to the code. And then I pasted his code in, and it gave me back the right answer. And it said like, okay, yeah, indexes in Lua start with 1. And I think I copied and pasted like the exact response it gave back into the forum. But I was like, wow, like if we actually had that integrated to where, like, especially with Lua in particular, if there was what if, when an error occurs, it takes the text of the error, and it takes the call stack, which is a JSON, it's a JSON structure, and it sends that to an LLM that has previously digested all our documentation, and it says to correct the mistakes. Then it could just receive back the corrected code and just automatically fill it in and fix the error, possibly. And this kind of only became a possibility because of the integrated script at IDE. Like, I wasn't really thinking about this before because I'm not going to go and write some extension for Visual Studio Code, but because we have the integrated IDE, hey, that actually is that would probably work pretty well, actually.
Yeah, so is your plan just to train a model based on train a model with the documentation and just let people download that model and run it on the home server, on the home computer?
Well, I don't know how to do that. I do know that you can, what you can do with ChatGPT and I think DeepSeek as well. You can send it information, and so you can send it like a whole book and have it read it, and then you'll get back a token that sort of saves that state that it's currently in, and then you can reuse that state. You can restore that state and then start a new conversation from that point. You can't. I don't think you can. That token, I think, can only be used with one account, though, with the account that it was generated on.
Right.
So you can't share it with other people. What you're
you could
describing,
create
what
an agent.
I would suggest, just taking. I would probably suggest just taking if I added some extra events into the editor, like event syntax error or event runtime error, and then included the necessary information, then you could just intercept those events and write your own script that does whatever you want with your own LLM. That could be a way of handling that.
Okay. But would there be an API like an API support for let's say there's an LLM server class where it handles the prompts and send data regardless of what service you use, and then it can go to OpenAI, it can go to Olama, it can go to DeepSeek.
Well, I don't know
Something
I'm not going to write
OpenWeb.
integrations for all those things.
That's how.
No, you just need a
Guys,
protocol.
one question: how much people you think are able to set up an AI system on their own computer, on their home computer, and link it to something like this?
It's actually
Maybe-
really
It
easy.
would actually be
one or
easy
two
if
of them.
you can
And then
use
you- and then you-
Open Web UI just for that.
Then you need to have the resources for the game development itself. So you need to think about if you have a big game, which is
No,
I
this is
don't know,
for development.
like six gigabyte VRAM.
It's not about this. No. This is not about like running it in while you're running the game. This is about development side.
When
Before
that
you
LLM
already-
is sitting idly, does it consume any? How much memory does it consume?
You can
Maybe
you
a
can,
gig or less.
yeah, and you can adjust its timeout feature. So I have an AI, like I have a Mac Mini that just sits on my network and it's always listening for prompts. And I can go access I can open Web UI and just say, hey, I need help with this, and it will just respond.
Well, it sounds. Yeah, I think what I would probably do is implement my own version that contacts my server, and then my server would use my own API key to contact DeepSeek and then get back a response. But I would do it in such a way that I would add those necessary events so that it would be possible to implement like your own system. Because I think the number of people who would be able to install all that stuff would be probably fewer than 1%.
No, it's actually pretty easy. You just download Olama and it's like an
I don't
exe
even know what
installer.
you're saying. Like Olama, what the heck is that?
It's
If
their
you want,
AI
I
from
can
Facebook.
Reaper. I can send you the information. It's actually a very, very streamlined. It's what he and I both run. We use Olama to grab models from. We go straight through Open Web UI. All you have to I mean, to integrate that would be very, very, very simple. And I know you're talking about like querying to your own server or whatever, but you can also have the secondary setup where you just run it locally, because most computers can run most of the smaller, lighter models locally.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two. I have two like personas that I'm hearing. I have like two identities that I'm hearing your statements as one, as like the programmer, like engineer. Like I'm like, yeah, I could do that. But then when I shift over to my to myself before I learned how to program, I just hear blah 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 blah. So we just switched over to an integrated IDE simply because people didn't want to install Visual Studio Code because they got it confused with Visual Studio.
Gotcha. So, well, you have to weigh the cost of like hosting your own server with a LLM that will take millions of requests every day.
Will
So
it?
there's that cost. I don't know. I don't know.
That
You have
really
to
is
look
up to
into
you, because you don't know how many users would actually be using that feature. Sometimes it could be barely any, or it could be a lot. And then, of course, on weekends, you'll have much higher load times for more
You
users
can just
using it.
make it like every other AI service. You give the users amount of tokens they can spend, and if the tokens are empty, they can buy a new one.
I don't want to buy tokens. I want to use my AI.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
but-
like, if you look at
Again,
that,
I think really that the amount of people who are able to creating the systems for themselves are, as Josh said, less than 1%. I mean, yes, last week we talked about making tutorials for pure beginners, like in a Roblox style, and now we talk about setting up an own AI system on their computer.
No, it's. I'm not saying that I want setting up their own AI system be the only way. I just want it to be an option for advanced users.
But
Yeah,
Josh
yeah,
said
yeah.
you already he will implement this
So,
callback.
wait. There's one thing there that would actually make that easier. All you would have to do for like a protocol setup is somewhere in the editor or whatever you have, you would just say you can either query your server by default, or for more advanced users, here's how you access, like an API or whatever through Web UI, and that'd be it. And then it would just query it directly on a local system versus the internet. It's
Yeah, something
not
like
as
that would work.
complex as-
Yeah, and if
I just want the option.
if there's so many people that it becomes a significant cost, then at that point that means there's probably enough people that you can just start charging like $10 a month or something to have that to have that AI assistance turned on all the time.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
it'll
actually
work.
what
I
I
think
was
it
gonna
works
say.
best with Lua because Lua is a much simpler language, so there's fewer things that the AI can mess up.
And more people need hand holding with Lua.
Yeah, yeah, but
Usually.
like I mean, the problem that you had, it would have been instantly solved. Like without him having to even post on the forum, it would have saved him a ton of time.
Right.
So
No, I'm
it's a
getting
very
what you're
interesting
saying.
idea.
No, I get what you're saying. I just want options of what AI I want to use. Like if I want to use yours, if I want to use mine, I just want the ability to change where I want my AI. Where I want those
Well,
queries to go to.
I think
you or I, we can send Josh the documentation. It's pretty simple. If he wanted to set up that ability, it would just take maybe an hour or two of
You could
setting it
send
up
it.
in a
You could send it
device.
to
It's
him.
not too, yeah. But I'm saying like if he has that implementation, all that he'd have to do then is in like the UI for the editor or whatever you're running, it would just be like you either go to his server or you change it to run on your own. That would be it. You basically just
Right. That's all I want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so have an easy to use version for that's by default, and then just don't box it in so that it can be used with anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Open web UI and all that will allow you to do that with a simple like.
Well, you don't need
it's
Open Web
really
UI, but you
you
should
don't even have
like.
to use that. Yeah.
Well,
run
you
it
just want
directly in
like
Python.
Open Web UI where it says, "Oh, what do you want to talk to? You want to talk to, DeepSync? You want
Yeah.
to talk to Open Web? You know,
Yeah.
it's like
We can
something
send you
like
the
that."
documentation if you need it though, Josh. He and I both have it, so it might
Yeah,
help
if
in
you
that
just
for
if you just post it on the forum, like maybe in the programming forum, that would be best because if people send me things like uh, it's gone after the first time I see it. But if it's in the forum is
I'll
really
put it
best
in.
because then I can always go back and look at it.
Would the suggestion form be good? Because it's just a suggestion of
Yeah,
your
that's a good
existing
idea
ID.
actually.
Yeah,
And-
I'm just gonna send you a screenshot of like what I see on Open Web UI, and it's like I just want that option in your AI integration. That's it.
all of that is available also open source anyway, Reeves. So yeah, just make sure you link to all the if you need to all the stuff, and if you need the other links, I have some of them.
All right. No, that's all
and
good.
I have another question. The multiple terrain thing is out of the desk
Is what
because at the moment you only can create one terrain in
in
the
the
scene,
editor?
right? Yeah.
You can
But,
create more
but
through code, but in the editor it's only one.
okay, but what if you want to create something like in simulator or something in this area, so where you have or where you want to have multiple terrain patches and combine them together or something like this?
For what?
I mean, yeah, if you think about the game like this Euro Truck Simulator, it's a really big game. You can't even, or you are not able to make this with one terrain.
I don't think you can realistically make a game like that with Leadwerks. Not without putting a huge amount of work into like a streaming terrain system that would just be. I mean, that would be a huge amount of work. I probably wouldn't attempt it. We used to, yeah. There's having a paradigm of at least in the editor. I mean, you can still do this in code, but in the editor we just have one terrain, and it's very useful because when you get rid of options, too many options are bad. When you get rid of options, it allows you to function at a higher level. So, for example, the terrain mesh blending here. This is only really possible because the renderer, what I started doing is it iterates through all the terrains that exist, and whichever the first one it finds, it sends that ID into the shader as a uniform value. It sends in the terrain ID and the terrain material. And then so the the fragment shader, the global like fragment PBR shader, is able to easily retrieve that terrain ID. It just checks to see if it's equal to 0 or not. And then if it's not 0, then it proceeds to look up the height map of that terrain at this spot. And then it checks to see if if the pixel is within range of the terrain height, and then it applies that blend to it. Those are the kinds of things you can do when you don't have too many options, because otherwise that would just be not really feasible. Overly complicated at best. So I think the paradigm of one terrain per world is a good one. It's possible to it's possible to get around that if you're doing it in programming, but for the editor, I think that's really the best solution. And implementing some crazy streaming system. I mean, the engines that do that, they're usually designed specifically for one game. It just seems like something that's never really going to pan out unless you have a huge budget. Any other questions?
Is that new A code act legit, or were you just, or is it a joke?
No. What did I say? 95% off?
I don't know. I don't know. Every time I hear sponsorships, my brain is programmed just to like dial, like just tune out. But whatever.
The Linus Tech Tips, they always do that. So I thought that's what you're supposed to do in a YouTube video.
Yeah, you are, but hopefully, someone's like auto skip, sponsor skip, plugins didn't trigger.
Oh, that's fine if they did.
That'd be kind of fun.
Okay, so
They would miss the joke, but.
All right, so before we continue, I just want to thank everybody who's recently given us a thumbs up on Steam. That includes Titeki Drogowit, The Cuzzy, Capcrunch, Metal OS, Agnologia, Knievels, Ricochet, Andy, Gashish Master, MyC3D, Gamer, Saru71, Mazel, Timmy, You, Playsa, Gravitate Games, Lilybite, Wreckage, Technofox, Casmic, Doctor Who 3GX, JD Gaming, Reap Blue, Anthony Python, ZZX18888, Edel Trick, Merrick IJC, Kent, Old Amsterdam, Drake Black, Merrick, Project Mayhem, Pedrito, James W. Harden, Troy Nitter, Altitude, Lucky Luke, Slick29, Gavaris 3, Waxy Rena, Conejo Tuerto, and Jessica 7. I did that in 2 breaths. Once you know.
Seems like we got more people.
Huh?
Seems like we got 2 more people. I don't
It's
remember
like blowing out
Jessica
birthday
07.
candles.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll stop the video here.